the other committee, let me say that I have the hint that a number of issues have been raised. I'm not a deep person in terms of the technical issues that deal with land development in Nigeria. But when it comes to the contemplated legal framework,
Sorry to interject, please.
very briefly so that everyone can understand the points I'm making. I am appreciative of the fact that you are very familiar with the challenges of the industry. And one of the ways that was proposed to solve this problem was to try to put together a development bill which was titled the Real Estate Regulation and Development Bill 2021, Senate Bill 540 or 540. The whole idea of the Senate Bill 540 was to target the problems and get stakeholders involved in policy formulation by way of lawmaking. But I think the bill which has been passed by the Senate, and I believe has now been sent to the House of Representatives for concurrence, will, in my view, in my respected but humble view, do more damage to the prospect of Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria than what they think they can gain from it. Now, I want to say that I have taken a holistic look at very many bills of this nature across the globe. I haven't seen in any of these countries where a body that is essentially a private body and is essentially an industry player or full of players can take charge of the central fulcrum of regulating the development of estates in Nigeria. Now, if you look at the law, and I'm not going to waste your time, I just go to a few points, and I'm sure most of you have copies of this law, so that the lawmakers can take note of the point I'm making when they consider their final decisions on whether to concur or not to concur. I start by saying that take clause 4A of that law, or the bill as proposed, for example. Clause 4A gives a very funny scenario. It provides for the regulation of the business of real estate development in Nigeria to the body that is set up, but in consultation with REDAN. There's no problem with that. But the question that I ask, where REDAN members are themselves the body that is to benefit from the law, the best they can expect to do is to make inputs that can promote development of real estates. But they didn't stop at that. Clause 4B gives the council powers to sustain development of the business of real estate development as championed by REDAN. What does that mean? This is a regulatory bill. There is no question that you want to make REDAN the judge in their own matter. It doesn't make sense for Parliament to pass a law and then put a private organization, as I prefer to refer to them, notwithstanding that they are major stakeholders in the industry, to help formulate the issues that that council will be looking at. To push my point further, look at clause 4F. It gives the council the power to register and license all real estate developers in Nigeria through the institutional guidelines of REDAN. So why are you setting up a council? Why not go to REDAN and license them? What is the point of making a law to empower a private organization? Public interest lawmaking is always done in good faith and in best practice of public policies. No government makes a law and then subjects the law to the control of one of those that he hopes to regulate. Now, look at the powers further given. If you look at Clause 4J, it gives the council the power to monitor, investigate, and sanction registered and licensed real estate developers that violate the bill through REDAN. So it is REDAN that's the police of the industry. REDAN determines who violates the law. Now, what is the council being set up to do? A council that will be funded by taxpayers' money. Look at the technocrats all seated. Look at many other statutory bodies that have business with law, development of land. But in their presence, punishment, in my view, is to be implemented in consultation with one of the stakeholders. So if you fall out with REDAN, because it is possible that not all developers will voluntarily wish to subscribe with REDAN. So if now, to just push it further, clause 8.1, clause 5, Roman 6, Roman 1D, makes it a requirement that unless a person is duly registered with REDAN, he cannot be chairman of the council. So even if you are a distinguished Nigerian technocrat in the area of land development, maybe a retired permanent secretary, a retired director who spent all his working career working on planning land development in Nigeria, he cannot qualify to be council chairman because he's not a member of a REDAN. I think that's too much. Now, if you look at clause 8.1 of the bill, it gives power to the minister to remove the chairman of the council from office on the recommendation of REDAN. So if the council chairman doesn't greet REDAN members properly, they can recommend to the minister and say, remove this man. And by this law, which they propose, he is removed. Now, if you look at clause 19 of the bill, it provides that the council shall only license developers engaged in the business of real estate development in Nigeria if such applicant, amongst others, has registered with and paid all applicable member dues to REDAN. REDAN is not the Nigerian Bar Association equivalent. It's not the equivalent of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. It's just a body that was registered under Part F of CAMA. And their objectives are set out, and I will just summarize that quickly. So you see how far that this bill has gone to undermine public policy and to do damage to our national family. Now, clause 29.1 of the bill makes it compulsory that 3 members of REDAN must be part of the council and must be part of any investigative panel set up to investigate any allegation. Minimum of 3 members of REDAN must be there, so that if they are not there, that investigation is not conclusive. Now, it didn't stop there. Clause 32 of the bill provides that the council shall collaborate with REDAN and relevant professionals in the industry to conduct capacity development training programs for developers. So it is now REDAN that must also train its challengers, its competitors, its rivals. If I am running a law practice, then it's other lawyers who have to compulsorily train me on procedure when I have the option of whether to go to Oxford or to go to Harvard or to go to the Nsukka University for additional training. So I think the compulsion by way of law is excessive. Now, the clause 32 of the bill provides that council shall collaborate with REDAN and I've dealt with that. Clause 41.8 defines REDAN as the Registered Association of Real Estate Developers under Companies and Allied Matters Act, CAMA, as incorporated trustees in 2002. Now the question that I ask, can REDAN be vested with the purported statutory powers as passed, and I've mentioned some? My humble view is no. And the reason is simple. Under the Companies and Allied Matters Act, CAMA, every company or incorporated body set up is limited to its objectives. And without those objectives, you cannot operate. And if you do operate outside those objectives, you are operating outside the law. The objectives of REDAN are clearly set out in their document before the Corporate Affairs Commission of Nigeria. They have only 4 simple objectives, which they claimed that they wanted to achieve in 2002. One, they wanted to provide central national organization which will articulate the aspirations and the targets of real estate developers. Very good. To promote the development of residential estates in order to increase the stock of housing, which is also not a bad idea. To promote rehabilitation, refurbishment, and national improvement in existing housing units, which is wonderful. And last, to set targets in line with government policies, objectives, with a view of mobilizing the private sector to participate in the targets set out by financial institutions. That's pure business. Now, how then does REDAN metamorphose from these 4 objectives to becoming a regulator and a statutory provider of services and a performer of public duties? What is the government doing? What do we pay them for? Why are they, the bureaucratic establishment, championed to implement executive policies in Nigeria? This is an executive matter. What is the business with REDAN? Is REDAN an associate executive member of the Federal Executive Council in Nigeria? Now, I proceed to say that the question that I ask are germane questions. And I further ask this question. When did the Constitution of REDAN make it compulsory for only registered members of REDAN to be licensed as developers engaged in the business of real estate development in Nigeria? It's not there. We've looked at that Constitution, we've looked at their aims and objectives. Why are they arrogating to themselves, or why is the government arrogating to them powers which they did not give to themselves in their own Constitution? I think it's excessive. Now, we have said that indeed there are several statutory duties vested on REDAN by SB 550, that is Senate Bill 514, which run against objectives for which REDAN was set up. And I say that that is against Section 838, subsection 1A of CAMA, and it's also contrary to existing public policy. And to that extent, it's a dead baby. It is as good as dead. Because even if the president has said that, this will be challenged very easily, and the courts will throw it into the lagoon without wasting time at all. Now, the next question that I ask is that, isn't this an attempt to concentrate the economic means of production in the real estate sector in the hands of a small group of people? I said, Mr. Chairman, from the analysis of the clauses which I put together just now, and the submissions that I have made, it is clear that the whole idea of passing SB 540 was to concentrate the functional regulation of real estate business in Nigeria as a means of production in the hands of a few individuals under the registered acronym of REDAN. The practical effect of the REDAN clauses, as they are now called, is to reduce competition, and reduce competitors to onlookers in the real estate business. Their power to speak in the industry will be subsumed. They will be severely intimidated, and investment will go down. If you cannot speak because your colleagues, your challengers are now the ones to sanction you, to change the regulatory body's head, to appoint a new secretary, it will then bring about loss of momentum and declining effect in terms of productivity. I also ask the question, how can the multitude of stakeholders in the estate development industry, including individuals, corporate bodies, statutory bodies, mortgage companies, financial institutions, be at the mercy of a few persons who merely registered an incorporated trustee years ago to realize those 4 simple objectives that I talked about? And then I ask the question, why should REDAN be encouraged by a proposed Act of National Assembly, passed by the Senate already, for that matter, to violate its own registered objectives under the relevant law in which it was created as a registered trustee? Once you do that, you are subjected to the laws of Nigeria, and of course, we can even move that trusteeship be nullified because you are going outside your terms. So we believe that that's not the only problem, and that the clauses in the bill are visibly unpatriotic. They promote anti-constitutional policies and should not be allowed in today's Nigeria. It is the duty of Mr. Chairman and his colleagues in this committee to ensure that every law we pass in Nigeria conforms to the provisions of Chapter 2, which deals with the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy, as required by Section 13 of our Constitution. Not only do you have the duty, this law is patently discriminatory, it is oppressive, and a monopolization of the status of government regulators. So, in the end, what do we really want the committee to do? Because the committee can do it. I know that when we were in the House, in those days, we rendered powerful reports to our colleagues and they believed us. And it was effective. I have looked at the caliber of the committee. I know some of the members of this committee. They have been floor generals for a while. And to that extent, I have no doubt in my mind that the House should rely on Order 12, Rule 10(6) of its own rules and Section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution and push this bill down and break it into pieces. It doesn't make sense for the president itself to be put in such a bad spotlight, which can make activists like us go after them. It doesn't make sense for the industry you hope to improve. It doesn't make sense in terms of the reputation of the government. When you put this law and compare it to foreign laws, it's a laughable attempt to make a simple organization become a government regulator. And above all, I then urge Mr. Chairman and the committee to please take it as part of the resolution of the technical committee at the end of the day and recommend against the passage. Do not give concurrence to that Senate bill and shoot it down. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This bill can be reworked, or whether the bill can be saved, put it that way. It's not a savable bill. I sympathize with the bill myself. But unfortunately, either way you look at it, and as we look at this bill, more ammunitions are being made available. And it's getting clear that the bill is in itself, as it is now, in the intensive unit. So once the House does the needful, that's the end of the bill. For example, the promoters of the bill themselves have promoted something outside their objectives. So the question would have been raised whether or not the bill is applicable to the whole of Nigeria if the bill escaped its self-contradictions. Because it has shut itself down by its own promoters. By acting outside the colors of the law, the bill cannot even give birth to itself. If it had survived that, for example, it managed to hide it, pretend that it was one of these overriding national bills and use the member to sponsor it, then the question will be raised about where is its applicability. If you say FCT, nobody will say what. As you rightly said, the urban and regional planning law is applicable to the FCT, the tribunal which is meant to work here. I don't know whether they still take cases there at all, but I know that is part of what should be done. Then the second point is that should we completely discard the bill? Arising from what I have just said, I think the answer will appear to be yes. The reason why you may not be able to save the bill is that the bill itself is void from the beginning. And as my brother rightly observed, you know the Senate. The Senate is, with the greatest respect, a special house. I'm not defining a special house. And ideally, it's supposed to be moderating. It has a moderating influence in all communities. If you go to France, half of them are on wheelchair. So when things get so hot, they are just supposed to come. But in this case, we are being legalistic. So it is the House of Rep that will do that job, not the Senate. Senate have just done what they have done. Send it to the younger and more vigilant and more intellectually progressive elements of parliament. So it is their duty now to do the needful and make sure that they finish it. The other question that was raised, the other question that was raised was who are the kind of persons, what can be done? Well, assuming without conceding that the bill could be saved, then of course it will be easy to constitute that council. First, the powers will have to go to, if you wanted to apply in FCT, the powers will have to go to the minister to appoint the council. And then he will, in his wisdom, know who to appoint as chairman of the council. Then you have to extend.
Which minister, FCT or housing?
No, the FCT minister. FCT minister, we are talking of development control. It's always the mayor of the city, in this case the minister, that takes charge of the development of that terrain. So he will then look at certain key office holders. For example, how do you have a bill that to regulate development that will not have somebody from the development control unit of the statutory ministry funded by public funds and taxpayers' money? It's an aberration. Then you will also be talking about professional bodies. I mean, you have Society of Engineers, you have the body of quantity surveyors. You know, these are people who you then have to nominate people here. And then they will be the ones that help to modernize the policy and take it to global standards. But as in this case, this bill does not deserve that attention at all. And so that's why we don't want to dissipate energy and take your time. So my advice is that I reaffirm my earlier submissions and urge you squarely and humbly to no, I will say I will not be using the word shoot. No, to allow my appeal. To allow my appeal. So that govern the estate development business in Nigeria and to see whether it's comparable to international best practices. And I will be very brief. The model law, in my view, as far as FCT is concerned, because this is a committee specifically set up on FCT, is the Establishment Act of the FCT, and I refer to the Federal Capital Territory Act, which, of course, by Section 7, sets it out clearly, and it prohibits any development of property unless the written approval of the authority has been obtained by such person or body. And then, of course, Section 14 provides that the President may make regulations generally for carrying into effect the provisions of the Act. And we know the relationship between the President and the FCT Minister. A lot of instruments have passed that power to the Minister. And so to that extent, we'll be looking at the regulations that are authorized by the Minister. But I think the champion regulation will be the guidelines for mass housing development scheme and, of course, the estate development. I don't want to bore the technocrats who are here. They already know the provisions contained in these guidelines with respect to assessment fee and the nature of the applicant. The applicant will be either corporate, as a body, or a statutory body. I mean, at the level of mass housing, I believe. And I also know that at the level of estate development, it may be the same requirement because the rules seem to be standard. I believe they will provide the relevant documents and swear to an affidavit of commitment to develop according to guidelines and in line with the stipulated time. This is where there is always problem here. People swear to this affidavit and many months after the takeoff, they are static. They just become a developmental dwarf. Whatever the reason is, no one knows. But we are hearing today financial constraints, a number of reasons. But I think these are things that should be regularly cross-checked with the statutory regulators. I know that these operators will also be required to have a technical staff. I need not name them. The regulators know that, and the stakeholders know the number of technical staff they are required, and who must, of course, not be less than 6 years cognate experience in the area that they profess to represent. But the question is, do you really meet these people on site, or do they use technical staff who are pretended technicians in the building industry? Because if you use people who have 6 years corporate experience, whether they be quantity surveyor, land surveyor, you are likely to get improvement in delivery time and in the quality that is delivered in the estate industry. So here again, the stakeholders need to realize that honesty is the best policy. Yes. You don't have to go and bring apprentices and represent them as surveyors and then mislead the authorities who think that you can be trusted, having sworn an affidavit. Now, of course, the financial requirement is there. Will include your feasibility study, your cash flow projections, your MOUs with financiers if need be, and if you have self-financing capacity, the evidence, all to be shown to them. I speak because these are regulations made pursuant to Section 7. These are the powers conferred on the minister and of FCT, and then of course the department for the control department will churn these things out. I know, as a matter of fact, that the development proposals must be submitted. You talk about the layout plan, the architectural drawings and the engineering drawings, and then if you go to land application fee, I don't know whether they have reviewed it, for large satellite development that you propose, for example, is 10M or 10 million. And I'm talking of for large development of estate development is 10 million. And if you want to do large development in satellite terms, it's about 5 million. I am aware that site appraisers, land use plan, and etc. have to be attached to this. I am also aware that architectural requirements and other engineering requirements. So I just go through that and say, we take for granted the other requirements. But I would like to speak about the next law, which is the Nigerian Urban and Regional Planning Act of 1997. And by the decision of the Supreme Court, is applicable to only the FCT. So it's not an extant law, it's not decorative, it's not moribund, it's still in force, as far as the FCT is concerned. One of the areas, and this may have prompted one of my brothers to describe lawyers as being a problem, is that if you were to go by this law, if you go by section 28, it says approval of the relevant development control department shall be required for any land development, which is considered. But here, there is a leeway for settlement of disputes, and this is what goes to court all the time, that the developers and of course the regulators don't also like. In section 45 and 46, it provides for a tribunal to resolve disputes, and then it is only when these disputes cannot be resolved that the aggrieved parties can then go to the FCT High Court by way of appeal. So the question will be, if we will make more use of this conciliation, arbitrational method of settlement, I am sure that the acrimony and the delay in litigation, which frustrates development of estates while interest is running high and wiping off your potential profit, could be avoided. Because as far as FCT is concerned, I am aware that our tribunal is in place. Whether it is now constituted or reconstituted is a different matter, but my appeal to the technocrats who are here is to ensure that this tribunal is functional, so that our brothers who may have grievances over your stop work notice and so on that you put there can go somewhere where they can spend little or no money to get some justice. Because under this tribunal, they can also make decisions affecting the regulators and direct the regulators to comply and remove that no stop order from the place, no work order or so, because that power is conferred on the tribunal by law. Now, to make it easy for the tribunal, there are urban and regional planning tribunal rules. The rules are available, and under the rules, the tribunal can make a decision under section 59, 60, 70, and 71 of the Act. And that decision, once made, should be complied with within 21 days or so, or if you're not willing to do so, you approach the FCT High Court. And that will be a more organized method of dealing with disputes in this industry. Then, the mother of all the laws in the industry, mind you, is the Land Use Act. Because this is the Estate Act, which is constitutionally protected. So you can't look at it at all unless you first amend the Constitution. It's like having a fetus in the womb of a mother. You just cannot examine that unless you first of all talk to the mother to take her for a scanning exercise. So this law is so protected that I doubt if there has been any attempt to review it at all ever since it passed. By this law, if the minister, for example, doesn't sign your certificate of occupancy, a developer is in trouble because most buyers insist on some of these documents. So it makes the minister in FCT very powerful. And therefore, that power must be handled with care. Now, the then question that arises is, what is the role of the area council chairman? Because they also have a circulation, allocation papers and so on. And I have been told in the past that there seems to be a policy in the FCT that only AGs or only the central body should do that. But the question is, the Constitution describes FCT to be like a state. And to that extent, it means that these area councils are also like local governments. So if the council chairman has the power to give customary right of occupancy to over a land, pursuant to the provisions of this act we are talking about, what then will stop an area council chairman from exercising the same power? So I think that's a debate that is frequent in the social media, but I think it's constitutionally solved. It's for technocrats to accept it with great grace and humility that the grand norm of the nation has spoken. Then the other problem is, what is overriding public interest when it comes to revocation? Because these same powerful figures I'm talking about are so powerful that they can look at you and revoke your land and give the reasons later. In the meantime, they will be making efforts to retrieve it because it's no longer your own. You will be in court battling with an injunction to stop them from carrying out their order. If you are unlucky, what happens? Now, I believe that the power to determine what is overriding public interest is a critical element. You cannot, for example, take land from one man and sell to another person for private development purposes. That would be abuse of power. And you should be getting ready to face the Code of Conduct Tribunal when you leave that office. Time does not run against such infractions. If you are protected, if you are not protected, right away, you should be dragged before that Code of Conduct Tribunal. Because that's a breach of your oath of office and your behavior as a public officer, whoever does that. I believe very strongly that the stakeholders themselves have complained very seriously about this law. They think it militates against the acceleration of growth in the development of the industry. But like them, we also cry when our hands are tied. Imagine that even the National Assembly works so well and manages to propose a review. And then they even pass it with 2/3 majority. And then it has to go to a minimum of 24 states to have to confirm it. What do you think of those men there who are democratic monarchs, who enjoy this type of power? Do you think there is a man who will give up power like that? It's so difficult. And that's why the governors don't want to go to that direction at all. So the possibility that that law will be tampered with is so uncertain. And we can only hope that may happen with the era of philosopher kings. We don't know if there are many enough to take that decision. But for now, we still have to wait a little bit. Why? Now, I have no doubt in my mind that the other issues that the stakeholders have raised is that they complain about delays in issuing certificates. They talk about extortion by government officials, and this is a recurring decimal. So if we can help that situation, release certificates early enough to them, let's try as much as possible. Where I come from, there's a parable that the man who chews food for the baby doesn't tie his throat, but he doesn't take the food in whole. So when you chew the food, you let the baby take its own, and whatever drops enter your throat. I mean, that's usually happening. Okay. So now I am of the view that because this is not within our purview, It's not a law we can really aggressively say we want to address. We just take solace in the fact that as our democracy grows, someday the beautiful ones may be born, they will take a look and say, no, we cannot continue like this. Now, the other instruments that I do know you have include the Abuja Development Control Manual. That manual was made in the last edition was 2007, and you did a very great job on that, but the only problem I find is that you have implementational difficulties in the manual. But I have to confess that something happened recently, and that was very unexpected from the bureaucracy. I was conducting a case in which somebody converted the use of a private property next to my client's home to a big medical facility, to a hospital. So we challenged the court to say, no, you can't do this. Who gave you authority to do this? Is purely residential, low density area, high class, check the manual, and so on and so forth. And following the affidavit that we filed in court, the FCT or their lawyers, they're more than honest. They pushed in a counter affidavit to say no, they didn't approve it. They don't know how the man got there. And as I looked at my client and my other colleague, did this come from them? Because usually they either stay away or they probably take side with the man, the big man who is oppressing. But on this occasion, they were 360 degree in the opposite. And to that extent, it showed that they were more interested in preserving the dignity of their office and in preserving the rule of law than any personal interest. That's a big commendation. I am mindful of the fact that very often you see people you give space to creating 14 flats, 18 flats in a small land in a low density area. And to that extent, you now put pressure on public infrastructure in the area. The transformer is overloaded, the sewage becomes, and in the days of Corona, who knows how far Corona can shoot, and so on and so on. So, if we can, we must strictly adhere to that. I had once in those days tried to do the same thing with the greatest regret, but I was reported by a retired officer, and I brought the thing down. Once he just wrote to me, I copied it, I brought it down completely in order to comply with what I didn't know any enough. So not many people have that type of conscience, but if we don't have the conscience, you drive it down us by doing your job. And you will see that there will be less complaint. I also find out that before you give your permit, a lot of numbers, a lot of issues are supposed to be complied with. Even the greens that are supposed to be there, the tree planting, we are not doing it. So we are losing the war against climate change, and you are a key component of this battle. So please remember to wear your boxing gloves and come back to the ring on this question. I wanted to say that I compared your laws that are in existence with the laws of many countries. I find nothing wrong with your laws. Absolute wonderful peace. You can only incrementally upgrade the law. But as we speak today structurally, most of your regulations are in solid order. And, but when you don't implement, people seem to think that the problem is that their laws are obsolete and archaic. It's not correct. Because when I look at the laws of St. Christopher's and Nevis, a popular island for big people who go to holiday there, I compared their developmental rules to your own. They were in similitude, except two conditions in their own. One, applicant must include, as a matter of compulsion, an environmental impact assessment. It's not circumstantial. You must. I don't know whether they do it here. Yeah, so they have to do that there. And then, of course, they also must maintain the number of trees they must plant. And so while they do it there, and people think they are wonderful, somehow, it is either we are not able to impose our assumption or we have a very difficult set of people in this country. And either way, it is the duty of government to whip us online. And we cannot be bigger than the government of Nigeria. Whether you are a big man or you are a small man, you are equal before the law. So if the law implementers themselves can demonstrate a sense of equality, this disparaging of Nigerian laws we no longer have a place in our history. Our laws are solid. They were made by men of Tiba and Canada. But each time we fail to implement them, we question the validity of our laws. People doubt the integrity of the officers. It's not so. I do know that one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. But by the grace of God, let the whole bunch take away that bad apple so that it does not spoil the bunch. And I think this should be our guiding principles for that. So having gone through that, I also looked at the Malaysian law, and I find out it's almost the same. The only difference is that in Malaysia, you can't get a building approval unless the subdivision gives consent. For example, a subdivision is what we call landlord association in this area. In other words, the landlord association must either object or recommend that they need that building in the area. I mean, because people were already there. So if you come to build a school in an area where they already had three schools, the landlord association or the subdivision, as it's called there, will raise serious objection, and once it is verified, that school will be disapproved. So it's important to consider existing tenants or existing landlords and existing residents of a neighborhood so that you don't continue to approve offensive structures, which brings about a whole lot of distortion in your master plan. And that's where this regulation is all about. And as I said, once I found out that your laws was getting in synchrony with many other laws, there wasn't a need to go beyond these two examples I've given. I commend those laws. I just recommend energetic, consensus, and more devastating consequences on our offenders. I thank you all very much.